If I asked you to guess what brand of GPS running watch the majority of ultramarathon runners were wearing here in 2023, what would you guess? Would it be Garmin? Would it be COROS or Apple or any of these brands? That's what I want to talk about today. This is going to be a different sort of video, so buckle up. I recently stumbled across some data that I found personally very interesting, and if you're a super nerd like me, you might find it interesting too. For some context, if you're an ultra marathon runner, you probably already know what the Western States Endurance Race is. And if you're not an ultra runner, well, the Western States Endurance Race is a 100-mile long ultra marathon that takes place in California in the month of June. The Western States is extremely hard to get into, and even if you can qualify by running a different race, you still have to make the cut in an elaborate lottery process where over 7,000 people with a combined 41,000 lottery tickets applied in 2023, and only around 370 people can actually get in. As you can tell, this race gets me pretty excited, and if you want to learn more about the race, you can check out some of the videos I posted last year when I actually went out and I got to spectate at the race, and I posted a bunch of videos that I'll post up here if you want to check those out. With all that said, I digress a little bit, and you're probably wondering what this video is all about. Well, at the Western States Endurance Race, the race organization does something really special because they take a survey of all of the runners and what brand of each piece of gear they're actually using. There's a statistic and a survey from a bunch of different equipment that these runners are wearing, from shoes to hydration vests to socks and even what kind of light they're wearing. And of course, one that I found really interesting is what type of GPS running watch each finisher of this race was wearing. While I was browsing through this data and the pie charts and everything, I was kind of amazed by this year's results as compared to the results from just a couple of years ago, which is why I wanted to make this video. And you might be wondering why this data actually matters. I think it matters quite a bit because if you think about it, this race is super hard to get into, and these people need to train their butts off to actually make it to the starting line at this race. That leads me to believe that this group of athletes probably takes this race very seriously and the gear they're bringing to this race very seriously as well, and with a lot of intention. I doubt that anybody at this race has a watch on their wrist by accident or because it was inexpensive or someone gave it to them. It's probably one they researched and picked out on their own for this specific purpose. And because of that, I would bet that this survey is a good indicator of the current market of sport watches in the sport of ultra running. Before we get to all the results, I do want to give a shout out to the race organization at the Western States Endurance Race for keeping track of all this stuff so people like me can nerd out about it on YouTube. If you want to check out all this data for yourself and go through your own pie charts, check out the link in the description down below that will bring you over to the Western States website where you can see what kind of shoes and socks people are wearing. I should also mention that while you're down there, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss more weird videos like this in the future. Okay, let's move on. Now, before we get to the 2023 results, I want to go back in time a bit to the 2019 results, because if you don't know, this is the first year that the Western States started tracking what GPS watch people were wearing at the race. I also think it will be interesting to look at some historical data so we can kind of paint a picture of how things change over the years. So what you're looking at right now is a pie chart from the 2019 Western States Endurance Race and everybody that finished the race that year. And as you can see, the biggest piece of the pie is taken up by Garmin. Of course, Garmin. There were 150 finishers at the Western States in 2019 wearing a Garmin device, and that makes up 51 or 52% of the total finisher population. Interestingly enough though, in second place, at a pretty close second place, is Suunto, with 96 people wearing a Suunto device in 2019 at the Western States, making up 33% of the population. Third place goes to COROS. This is really interesting. Only 15 people wearing a COROS watch in 2019 at the Western States. And in fourth place of all brands, Timex. Timex, really? What's even more interesting than Timex is the amount of people not wearing a watch at all, which was 10 people or 3.4% of the population of finishers, which is kind of wild. I mean, if it didn't happen on Strava, did it even happen in real life? And to cap off the 2019 stats, there were also 9 people wearing something else. That could be an Apple Watch or a Polar or whatever. Those 2019 statistics are super interesting, but let's jump forward in time a little bit to see how things have changed. Now we're looking at the year of 2022. And as you can see, Garmin again takes the biggest piece of the pie with 121 finishers wearing their watches at 44% of the finisher population. Now in second place here is COROS, which is really surprising. So from the year of 2019 with only 15 people wearing their watches to 2022 and 96 people wearing their watches, that is a massive jump between just a few years. And even more interestingly is in third place, Suunto stepping back a bit with only 38 people wearing their watches. There are 9 people wearing no watches and 5 people wearing something else. Again, 2022, super interesting to see how things have changed a bit. COROS moved up a little bit and Suunto moved back a little bit. Now let's talk about 2023 because things become even more drastic. In 2023, Garmin again taking the biggest piece of the pie, unsurprisingly. However, it's the biggest piece of the pie since 2019 with 182 people wearing a Garmin device, and that makes up 59% of the total finisher population. In second place is COROS with 90 finishers wearing a COROS device, making up about 29.5% of the total population. And in third place is Suunto, dropping substantially back with only 22 people wearing a Suunto at only 7.2% of the finisher population. And of course, on top of that, there were 7 people wearing something else. However, in 2023, there were only like 1 or 2 people not wearing a watch at all, which again is pretty surprising in 2023, but you can see how that number is shrinking throughout the years. So what does this data all mean? Well, it doesn't mean a lot, but it does mean something. And I think the elephant in the room here is just how fast COROS has made a huge advance throughout the years in the market. From almost no runners wearing a COROS watch back in 2019, fast forward 4 years later, and almost half the runners are wearing a COROS, which is really surprising. I think that's due to more and more devices being launched from COROS, with higher end devices having crazy long battery life, which is a very important feature to an ultra runner. And of course, on top of that, COROS's commitment to marketing in the ultra marathon space. They have professional athletes wearing them, they're sponsoring things, they've got all kinds of things going on in the ultra space, which I think is paying off for them. Another notable statistic, which is kind of concerning, is just how far back Suunto has dropped throughout the years, with almost half the runners wearing them in 2019 to now less than 8% wearing them at the 2023 race, and that's really wild. It's almost like COROS and Suunto like swapped places throughout the years, but it is important to remember that Suunto recently launched a new Suunto watch called the Suunto Vertical, which I have here, and this watch is an absolute beast when it comes to battery life, and I suspect it's going to be more popular in the ultra marathon space, so I guess time will tell in next year's 2024 survey. Another more subtle observation I noticed is how Garmin has taken an even bigger piece of the pie in 2023, and I did not expect that with brands like COROS making such headway in this space. However, they did launch the new Fenix line, the Epix line, the higher end Forerunner line that all have crazy long battery life. And I'm guessing that played a major role in why people chose these devices over the other brands in 2023. Something really interesting about these statistics now, even in 2023, is it seems like ultra marathon runners are still not choosing to buy an Apple Watch, like an Apple Watch Ultra or a Google Wear OS watch to track these long distance runs, which does make sense, but I'm still surprised that not even a smaller, bigger piece of the pie has grown over the years, even now in 2023 with something like the Apple Watch Ultra, which could arguably get through a 100-mile ultra marathon. Not easily, you'd have to charge it along the way, unless you're really fast, but I was expecting something bigger there. Another odd observation I noticed about these stats is that Polar, which makes watches like the Garmin Epix Pro I have here, which are fully capable of running a 100-mile ultramarathon with, were completely lacking on these statistics and surveys for some reason. I guess that might be due to their marketing, mainly being in the triathlon, swimming, cycling space. But like I said, the Garmin Epix Pro was designed for trail and ultra running, but it's just not present here in these stats. So what do we do with all this data? Well, nothing really. This is purely for entertainment. And if you're wearing a watch or a brand that's not on this list, does it suck? Should you sell it and buy something else? No, of course not. It's important to remember that this data was collected from a single 100-mile long ultramarathon, where battery life and on-demand features like mapping and navigation are the most important thing to these runners, which is why they chose these devices. If this was a competitive 5K or even a casual marathon, I'd bet we'd see a lot more Apple Watches out there because they make sense for that kind of race. And if this were a triathlon or even an Ironman, I suspect we'd see a lot more Wahoo devices and Polar devices out there. But it's not. It's an ultramarathon, and certain brands are marketing hard towards this specific sport, which seems to be paying off. With that said, I still find this data to be super interesting, which is why I'm sharing it in this video today, so hopefully you found it interesting as well. And in the future, I'm hoping they can actually collect more data, like exactly what model of each brand people are wearing at the race. That would be really cool. I know it'd be difficult, but people like me would find that really fascinating, and it's probably just a me thing, but I don't know. And now I want to hear from you. What watch are you wearing? Do you run ultramarathons? Do you even care about this data and this sort of thing? Were you surprised by the results? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And I think we did it. We've reached the end of this video. Like I said before, if you want to see all of these stats and surveys for yourself, I'll have it linked in the description down below so you can go check out what shoes and watches and things people are wearing. And of course, if you found this video helpful, fun, educational, anything, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below, because that really helps me out. And while you're down there, check out the links in the description where I'll have all of the watches I showed off in this video linked. And those links do help support this channel and they cost nothing extra to use, so you might as well use them. With that, check out the podcast. Have you done that yet? I'll have that link down there too. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye.